Once upon a time, a wise, kind, beautiful old man sat on a beach and watched his last sunrise. But this story starts long before then. High up in the mountains above the city now called Santa Fe. The earliest name I know of those mountains is the Sierra Madres, the Mother Mountains. And in those towering peaks, once upon a time, there was one lonely puppy who was found next to a trail. I don't know how he got there, but from there he found his way to the Santa Fe Animal Shelter, which is where I met him. I wasn't looking for another dog. I had gotten a dog a year earlier, whose name is Morrigan. And Morrigan was the old goddess of crows and fertility and feminine vengeance and death. And Morrigan is a wonderful goddess and a wonderful dog. But I was in the Santa Fe Animal Shelter because my sister was dating a man who had a dog who was very insecure, and they wanted to get a companion dog for that dog, so I was helping them find a puppy. And in that shelter there were a whole bunch of Chihuahua puppies at that time, and one little black cattle dog kind of thing. And then we were walking around the adult section, and in one pen was this other puppy, but he was too big to be with all the little Chihuahuas because he stepped on them. And he looked so sad. And my sister and her partner took home the little black cattle dog thing. But for the next night, that whole night, I just couldn't stop thinking about that puppy, this soft cream coat and his big eyes, looking so sad to be alone. And so the next day I went back. And I paid $125. I hung out with you and asked if you wanted to be my friend and join our pack. And you said yes. You met Morrigan and you were very excited. And in the old stories, the reason that the wizard Merlin was so powerful is that he was apprenticed directly to the goddess Morrigan. And so when I had this old Morrigan dog, she was a year old at the time, and I got this younger male dog, I thought, oh, you must be Merlin. He was soft and fluffy and adorable. And I was a little sad because his tail wasn't fluffy at all. It was like a little rat tail that just poked out. But over the next months, his tail exploded into this glorious plume. 18 inches of hair that comes off of it. And I worked in a school at the time, a democratic school where the students hire and fire the staff. And Morrigan worked there too, and Merlin started hanging out. But everyone loved him. He was very soft. But he was the hardest dog to house train that I've ever known in my entire life. It took almost a year for him to stop, to learn to go outside. And he was so confused and so sad about it. And that was right at the tail end of my drinking days. And I was not as kind or patient as I should have been with him. And one of the early lessons that I remember him teaching me is one day, he was probably 6 months old, and he had started going to the bathroom again, and I went to grab him and move him outside. And because I wasn't as kind or gentle with him as I wish I'd been, he was afraid of my hands, and he ducked away from me. I never hit him or anything. I just wasn't kind all the time. And I had a framing axe, a big axe with a 12-inch blade that didn't have a sheath at the time, and it was leaning in the corner of the house. And when he ducked away from me, he stepped on that axe, and it cut all 4 of his metacarpal tendons in one of his back paws. Cut through to the bone. And having this little puppy who was then so scared and so hurt in my arms. Trying to calm him down, knowing that I had just harmed him. And I didn't have any money or anything at the time. I did all my own medical work on myself and stitched myself up, and so we put some analgesic around it and tried to help him calm down and fed him treats, and I sewed his skin back together. And my doctor friend, who I called, said that at that age the tendons were likely to knit to the nearest bone. But one of the reasons I was excited to have a husky was to do skijoring, having the dogs pull you on skis. And that made me never want to take him skijoring, because he's flat-footed in his rear left paw. I didn't want to strain it. Yeah. And we would go up in the mountains and romp around all over the place all the time with Morrigan. And I knew I was going to move back east at some point, where there's all this water. I'm sitting in front of a lake right now. And so I wanted to make sure he knew how to swim. I have these memories of carrying him up to the hot springs. This is the most pleasant water around there. And he'd love the hike up there. We'd hike 8 miles up the side of the Valles Caldera to get to a hot spring. I'd bring him up, and I'd try and be so nice to him and gentle with him and feed him treats and put him down in this hot water, and he hated it so much. And I'd try to get him to swim by putting him on one side of a stream and then crossing to the other side. And every time he would just so delicately, he would sit there and howl sadly for a minute, and then he would so delicately go and find whatever it was that crossed the stream, even if it was the tiniest little stick, and with perfect grace he would just walk across this little stick a quarter mile away, and then come back looking so proud of himself. I solved the problem. He worked in that school, and a lot of children cried into this dog. He's always been so stable and so gentle, and just a good dog for hugging. He carries a lot of young people's secrets. People told him many things that they couldn't tell anyone else. And he's held all that with this grace that I just can't even imagine. There was a period of time between when he was maybe 8 months and 12 months old where every morning I would wake up and he would be sitting at the foot of my bed, on the bed, looking directly at me with his paws together. And he would just ask these questions. Vocally, he would say like, "Arr, arr," every morning, the same kind of questions. And he clearly had some serious existential exploration going on. And I didn't know your language well enough to answer you, my friend. Ah! But after 4 or 5 months of that, for whatever reason he came to, he stopped asking. He used to come home with baby animals. He would just go out into the desert behind our house there, the arroyo, and he'd come back looking strangely proud of himself and open his mouth, and he would spit out like a baby mouse, like just a tiny, not even eyes open. No harm to them whatsoever. He would just put them there. And I was like, oh, what do I do with this now? And it was a series of questions of what to do with these tiny baby animals. I don't know if he thought he was helping them, if he thought they were friends to bring home. I have no idea. But one day he brought home a baby rabbit, a baby cottontail, and the thing was the size of your thumb. And I called some animal rescue center and asked them what the protocol was, and they were like, oh, the baby lagomorphs, the rabbits, inherit their whole gut biome from their mother. So if they're not with their mother, you might be able to keep it alive on cream or milk or something for a little while, but they won't be able to digest the local grasses. So your best bet is to put it outside and near where you think the mother might be, and maybe she'll smell it and come get it. And otherwise, quicker. So I put the rabbit behind the house next to the wood pile and said some prayers for it and gave it some milk and wished it the best, knowing it would almost certainly be eaten. But somehow that rabbit never got the memo, and it lived and thrived and lived there in our wood pile behind our house for the rest of the time we lived there. So we just had this sort of semi-feral rabbit friend that Merlin had brought into our lives. Hi. When he was maybe 3, we were at a big party, a bonfire. It's a bunch of fun people and dogs and music. And there was both my dogs were there. And this other gentleman had found a coyote, not like a baby coyote, like a full-grown coyote that he'd somehow gotten to stay with him. And he'd brought it to this party. And near the fire, I was hanging out. And Morrigan, the older dog, all of a sudden, this coyote attacked her. And most people, I feel like most people today don't understand dog fights, and they think that when there's a lot of loud snapping and paws up and like flashing and ears getting cut, that's a dog fight. And it's not really. Dog fights are quiet and low and scary. And that coyote all of a sudden had her by the neck and meant to end her life. And we recognized this, and myself and a number of other people were closing very quickly to break these two animals apart, when all of a sudden this beast leapt through the rest of the people closing in and just took that whole coyote's neck from the back and just grabbed it in a way that the coyote released Morrigan and just whipped this animal. And I remember watching this coyote fly through the air and then stood paws braced with all teeth out and just like fluff all the way, like the full mane around, like this aura. And it took me a minute. Everybody jumped back. We'd all been closing on this wild coyote and this dog, and then this thing happened. Everyone was like, whoa! It took me a minute to recognize my own dog, because he was not the animal that I knew. He's been the most gentle, most loving being I've ever known. But in that moment, he taught me the difference between a capacity for defense or violence and the identity of it. Because Merlin has never identified that way, and if he did, he'd be terrible at his job. It would have been a bad dog, but that's not his identity. And that is the only time I've ever seen that side of this animal. But damn, it stayed with me. Oh. And we moved back to Maine. And my sister and I started a school together. An outdoor school, democratic outdoor school with a high school. Teaching kids everything. listening to birds and plants, everything from that to formal mathematics and logic. It was wonderful. And Merlin worked there every day and was a beloved teacher and mentor and friend there. And his safety has always just been perfect. I've never seen him hurt anybody or anybody even feel threatened by him other than when they first meet him and don't know him. He's just a giant, the kids called him a teddy wolf. But once before, when we lived in Santa Fe, probably 2 months after I got him, he was 5 or 6 months old then, a couple months old when I got him. I woke up in the early light of the pre-dawn, so the world was in grayscale, and I woke up and Merlin had his ears pricked and was looking at something out the window of our first floor little casita, and I looked out the window and there was an arroyo behind our house, a wild green space with a intermittent stream that ran all the way up to the mountains, so it was connected to the mountains there. I looked out and there were these 5, maybe 6 tall, beautiful, stunning animals who certainly looked to me like gray wolves. And they were just looking at the house, and Merlin was looking at them. And it didn't feel like there was any threat in it. I was barely awake. I woke up as this pre-dawn, surreal moment, and I was looking at these animals. And the energy, the feeling that I had from them was that they were just checking in on him. I have no idea what his heritage is. I expect he's some kind of mutt. I don't like it when people claim that their dogs are wolves. He may well be just a husky Malamute or something or other. But for whatever reason, it felt like those animals were checking in on him. He was with me through my father's passing. My father met him and appreciated him. My father loved dogs. And just had he's always felt timeless. As soon as he had his full adult body, he's looked basically the same. Maybe 7 years ago, I was in a weekly gaming group with some folks, and there was a young couple there who had moved to the area recently, and Merlin, when he went in, he's been pretty neutral to most people his whole life, but the people he likes tend to be really good people. And we went in, the dogs were at the gaming group. My dogs are very social. And he went up to this woman, and I didn't know her very well. I'd known her for a year, so she'd been in the community, but I hadn't spent much time with her. And she was petting him, they were hanging out. And all of a sudden she looked up and she was like, "Your dog bit me." And I was like, just in my head, I was like, I don't know who you are, but I know you're lying. And it's weird that you're lying, and I don't know why. The dog never bit anyone in his entire life. He's had kids crawling all over him, whacking him, playing with his ears, and he's been the safest animal I've ever known. And there's a way in which Merlin taught me what trust was. There's never been a being in my life whose judgment I trusted more than you. His just track record has been absolutely perfect. His entire life, he's been showing me reality. His ears and his awareness are so sharp. Even sitting here, he will flick an ear. If somebody were to start walking down that railroad track behind me, he would hear long before I do. And he'd tell me with just a little bit of body language, somebody's coming. And if he ever felt like they were a threat, he'd tell me that too, with different body language. And I've just learned to trust him so much that his awareness feels like my own. I think that I know things because he knows them. I think that I recognize my surroundings in the way that he does. It's been like that my whole life. His whole life. From the time he was a puppy, he would notice things way before Morrigan or I do. And he would tell us, very, very quietly, tell us what's going on. He's always loved watching sunrises. Or the time he was a little baby, he would just sit in the morning if we were up and watch the sun come up. The whole time, sit perfectly still, just staring dead centered at the rising sun. Oh. So I didn't know why this woman was lying and saying that my dog had bit her. I didn't like it. I didn't like her for it. The next time we went over to the gaming group, I watched him do it. Bite isn't the word I would use, but he did open his mouth and put his front teeth on her and give her just a little nip in a way that I'd never seen before. 7, 8 years later, that's my spouse. That's my life partner. That's my person. And Merlin needed to tell me. Oh. 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 We got the puppy, our puppy Boca, coming up on a couple years ago, hoping that Merlin would be able to pass on some of his wisdom to that dog, give them a few years of overlap. And Merlin has never liked him from the first day. He was not a fan. Boca and Morrigan are friends and they play all the time, but more and more Merlin has excused himself. He's loved Morrigan. They've been partners in a way. She's always been really social with other dogs. But when I got Merlin, she basically stopped. She was like, this is my person. This is my friend. And she loves him and curls up with him and spends time with him. And she still plays with other dogs, but nowhere near. Ever since Merlin came home, it's been like, oh, this is the one. She loved him the day he came home. And maybe a couple months ago, his mobility started to really go. And my spouse and I were watching almost daily decline, where he would have a hard time getting up, have a hard time moving around. And we were concerned. We brought him to the vet, and they have some new shot that's supposed to help with that, or painkillers, but he hates taking pills, so we went with the shot. And it did stabilize his mobility some, but I don't know if it's connected or not, and it kind of doesn't matter. A week or two later, his diet started to really, his appetite started to really go. Eating less and less every day, turning down foods he's always loved. And got to the point where he was only eating maybe 1 or 2 little tiny pieces of food every day. And even that wasn't that excited about. And then my sister, I shared with my family that he was probably starting to walk that road. My sister wanted to say goodbye to him. Brought him some moose meat. which is medicine here. And he was more excited about that moose meat than he'd been about anything in a while. He ate probably 10, 15 little pieces of moose meat from her. She gave us more. And so he would eat a bite or two of moose meat every day for the last 2 weeks. And we ran out of moose meat a couple days ago. And he ate one bite of a cornrepa, traditional Venezuelan. Yeah, buddy. There's some moose meat. But since then he hasn't wanted anything. And we just yesterday got some more moose meat to offer him, and he hasn't wanted any of it. So it seems like he may have taken his last food. And every walk feels like a blessing. And every walk feels like he loses something that he's not getting back. What do you need, my friend? Every walk feels like a blessing. I spent this past weekend in ceremony. I had a men's healing gathering led by a bunch of incredible indigenous people. And I knew he's been on this road, and I asked him if he would stay through the weekend at least, if he could. And I've been so grateful because he's still opening things up. My grief for him and the awareness that he's walking this path now have made it real easy to cry this whole weekend. And my tears have been flowing, and that's been a gift to myself and to a lot of other men. I didn't see men cry growing up. It just wasn't part of my world. Oh, and our grief is our gratitude. What would I be saying to this dog who's taught me so much for me to be stoic today? For me to act like this didn't affect me. For me to be distant from it. Distant from how much it hurts. What would I be telling him about the value of his life? About the value of his lessons? My tears are my praise for this beautiful being who's taught me so much. Who's taught me more than any man I know about what masculinity is and should be. Who's taught me to keep my freaking blades sheathed. Taught me consistency, taught me trustworthiness, taught me what it meant to have safe hands. Who looks around with such joy in his eyes, to this day giving little skips as we move toward the forest, and out here this morning, watching the ospreys dive and hunt, watching the ducks, watching the leaves fall from the trees and the cattail pollen. And seeing that the holy masculine that I spend so much time looking for and grieving is all around me, calling me in all the time, in the form of my dog, in the form of the grass I sit on, in the birds and the stag. These things that I look for are just the world I live in, reaching for me. Merlin's never really liked drama. In the last few weeks, there's been a lot of people visiting him and crying at him, and he's very patient. but he's mostly present. Yeah, buddy. We came out here to watch this sunrise. I got up and brought him out, and he was very slow. Very slow. Once we're out here, he just sits with his head up, facing the sun, saying, "This thing you're looking for, I'm pointing at it. I am it." I want to share a part of a story that will not mean as much to anyone who hasn't read this series of books, but it's a set of words. That just catches some of what I'm feeling in this way. And it starts with a man and his wolf asleep together and remembering their lives. And then we sank past those ancient memories into perfect rest and comfort. Healing begins in deep sleeps such as that. This is the man talking. He stirred first. I nearly woke as he rose, gingerly shook himself, and then stretched more bravely. His superior sense of smell told me that the edge of dawn was in the air. The weak sun had just begun to touch the dew-wet grasses, waking the smells of the earth. Game would be stirring, and the hunting would be good. "I'm so tired," I complained. "I can't believe you're getting up. Rest a while longer. We'll hunt later." "You're tired?" "I'm so tired that rest won't ease me. Only the hunt." I felt his wet nose poke my cheek. It was cold. "Aren't you coming? I was sure you'd want to come with me." I do, but not just yet. Give me a bit longer." "Very well, little brother. Just a bit longer. Follow me when you will." But my mind rode with his, as it had so many times. We left the cave, thick with man stink, walked past the cat's new cairn. We smelled her death and the musk of a fox who had come to the scent, but turned aside at the smell of the campfire's smoke. Swiftly, we left the camp behind. Night Eyes, the wolf, chose the open hillside instead of the wooded vale. The sky overhead was blue and deep, and the last star was fading from the sky. The night had been colder than I had realized. Frost tipped some of the grass, but as the rising sun touched it, it smoked briefly and was gone. The crisp edge of the air remained, each scent as sharp as a clean knife edge. With a wolf's nose, I scented all and knew all. The world was ours. "The turning time," I said to him. "Exactly. Time to change, changer." There were fat mice hastily harvesting seed heads in the tall grass, but we passed them by. At the top of the hill, we paused. We walked the spine of the hill, smelling the morning, tasting the lip of the day to come. There would be deer in the forested creek bottoms. They would be healthy and strong and fat, a challenge to any pack, let alone a single wolf. He would need me at his side to hunt those. He would have to come back for them later. Nevertheless, he halted at the top of the ridge. The morning wind riffed his fur, and his ears were perked as he looked down to where we knew they must be. "Good hunting. I'm going now, my brother." He spoke with great determination. "Alone? You can't bring down a buck alone," I sighed with resignation. "Wait, I'll get up and come with you." "Wait for you? Not likely. I've always had to run ahead and show you the way." Swift as thought, he slipped away from me, running down the hillside like a cloud's shadow when the wind blows. My connection to him frayed as he went, scattering and floating like dandelion fluff in the wind. Instead of small and secret, I felt our bond go wide and open, as if he invited all the witted creatures in the world to share our joining. All the web of life on the whole hillside suddenly swelled within my heart, linked and meshed and woven through one another. It was too glorious to contain. I had to go with him. A morning this wondrous must be shared. "Wait!" I cried, and in shouting the word, I woke myself. Nearby, the fool sat up, his hair tousled. I blinked. My mouth was full of salve and wolf hair, my fingers buried deep in his coat. I clutched him to me, and my grip sighed, his last stilled breath out of his lungs. But Night Eyes was gone. Cold rain was cascading down past the mouth of the cave. Ah! My older dog, Morrigan, wants to be next to us all the time. She's on top of our feet all day. She never wants to be more... She wants to be as close as possible. And she's always been like that, even in the woods. But Merlin, for Merlin, joy has always been around the next bend in the path. If he had the leadership of our pack, we would not have a house. We would live camped in the bush. That's where he's always been most happy. He doesn't understand why we go inside. I've been following him for so long, and been a restraint on him in the way that domestication is. Calling him back, telling him no, telling him come back. And always, even as he's been a good dog and listened and learned recall and downstays, he's always seemed so confused by it. Like, why? Why are you calling me back? Why are we not going further? Oh! We used to howl in the hills of Santa Fe. Oh, up in the mountains. He just would love howling, and when he was a puppy he would start, and he taught me, and I learned to join him, and his howl was so much louder than mine, just echoing off the Sierra Madres, resonant and deep and powerful, and mine felt small next to his. And yesterday, I went for a walk in the woods with him, and I told him he could go. I told him he'd gotten us through, that his work was done and we'd be okay. I have the puppy he hates and the pack that he's led me to. My spouse, Morrigan, is here and strong. I gave him tobacco. I wished him well on his journey. He hasn't howled in a long time. I don't remember the last time. It's been years. And that strong old howl. But as I sat there weeping and sobbing with him, on either side of this little stream in the woods, he started to howl with me. And it was an elder's howl. Grainy. Breathy. But he threw his head back and gave that elder's song to the dying light. And we howled together. And I was so grateful to sing with you again. I know it's probably the last time. Underneath all the fluff, there's very little of him here now. He's mostly gone. Oh. He's got at least 2 paws over that veil already, and I'm grateful for every day he spends here. When I was teaching him downstairs and recall, we did a lot of that in the Santa Fe Dog Park, which is this massive sprawling park up above the co-op. Great for distraction because it's full of other dogs and rabbits. I don't know why those insane rabbits live in that dog park, but they do. And he learned to do downstairs, and the release for that was the words "free dog," which I often yelled so shortly that people would be like, "Is your dog's name Frito?" And I was like, "No, I'm saying free dog." I don't need to tell him to be in a downstay anymore. He doesn't move much. So I haven't said those words to him in a long time. And yesterday, after howling with him for a while, I told him free dog. Ah! Ah! You can go! With my love and my blessings and all my gratitude and every tear, a praise to you. Martin Brechtel talks about how when we go, our ancestors need to paddle a canoe across the darkness, and they need our tears to make their paddles and to make their cross all the way. And so I'm giving you all the tears I can, my friend. Oh, in gratitude for your beautiful life and all of your lessons. Free dog. Ah, may your lessons and your tears continue to ripple out into the world. May the other men cry. Learn to see with some of your eyes the way that you've passed on to me. Oh. I know you may stay another day or two. I don't know if you'll see another sunrise, though. I'm grateful to share this with you. I'm grateful for the powerful ceremony this weekend. A lot of men coming together and breaking things open and learning some different ways. Crying. I'm grateful for you giving me so many tears to share and your generosity so that I can share them with some of the people watching. Our grief is our gratitude. And the level to which we separate ourselves from our grief is the distance we put between ourselves and our gratitude. And so this is how I'm doing my best to face grief today, in order to hold the gratitude and let you move on with the grace and integrity that you deserve, not holding it distant. And we need to grieve every part of our life that we're grateful for. Oh, when we're away from our people, when our children leave the home, we need to grieve that so that they know how much we love them, and we need to let them see that. Every part of our life that we're grateful for, we have to offer tears to, sometime or another. And I'm so grateful for you, my friend. Safe journey. Thank you for going on ahead. I will catch up with you there. know that in this culture, when we see grief, there is this reflexive instinct to comfort people. And it would be such a grave insult to the lessons and power of this being to comfort me now. Now is not a time for comfort. And that instinct to comfort people in grief is often a suppression of that grief. I think almost always. So please don't comfort me. What I'm feeling is holy. It's holy and it's necessary medicine. I believe that many of the wounds of the world today stem from people not being willing to sit with the discomfort of grief. And Merlin is showing us that now. I want to honor him with my tears. I want my tears to flow more freely. I don't want to hear anything about how there'll be other dogs and I don't want to hear. And that's not me trying to hurt myself. That's me trying to heal myself and heal that distance. Malidoma and Sobonfu Somé talk about, who are the most talented grief practitioners I've ever known. I sat with Sobonfu. Talk about how there's only one grief. There's just the one grief. It's all connected. And what we experience as grief are the inroads to that. So Merlin is helping me get in touch with the grief that I have suppressed my entire life, the grief that we should be feeling in the world. All the tears that I have not shed, this dog is leading me to right now, and maybe leading some of you to as well. It's not distant. It's all right there. The unshed tears are what break the world. So I'm asking you to do myself and this dog and yourself and the world the honor of not comforting. Let this be uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. That's the gratitude. That's the praise. That's the pathway to life. This lake can help show you what I mean. This lake used to have an outlet over here. You can sort of see there's a train trestle over there. And then it had an inlet over on the other side of this peninsula, way over there, another half mile. But when the state put in this railroad track here, they didn't want to pay for two trestles because it would have been uncomfortable for them. Financially, I guess. I don't know. So what they did was just route the water that used to be the inlet back through a swamp over here and put the inlet into the outlet. So now the entire lake is just an overflow for the stream. There's no current moving through it. And this leads to all kinds of ecological problems, huge algae blooms. The whole biome here is unhealthy because the water is not moving. It's just backed up. If someone came in and started trying to open up the inlet again so that the lake could flow, would we try and comfort them? Would we say, no, stop. That's uncomfortable. Let me comfort you into this stagnation. The water needs to flow. I know the end of this video is all over the place now, but as I walked back from that beach, he finally reached a point where he couldn't walk anymore. And so I had the privilege of carrying him back down the railroad tracks to the car. And he's been in and out of different realities. You know, he's got at least 2 paws in another world now. And he'll be kind of distant and vacant and just somewhere else. And then he'll sort of wake up and be more present. And when he wakes up, he's awake, he's just far away. And then when he's back here again all of a sudden, he's so happy to see me. And he just wags, looks at me and wants to move closer and put his nose on me. And it's some kind of balm to my soul, like some kind of healing that I've needed my whole life. My home was so unsafe, and I was not loved. And now, I just sat here and said that I trust this dog above everyone and everything else in the world. I just said that I trust this dog implicitly. He's the one who showed me my pack, showed me my spouse, that he's the one who taught me stability and consistency and love. And the thing that he's telling me as he walks this path is how much he loves me and how worthy I am. I just don't even know what to do with that. The gift that he's giving my children and my community by helping just drive this thing home. Do I trust you or not? I do, and you love me. When you wake up back into this world a little, you're just happy to see me and happy to be with me. And so I just wanted to pass that on of how much he's carrying me. And how little it feels to carry him. And know that if there are animals in your life, your dog, who you trust and they love you, that's a gift they're giving you about yourself. Thank you, my friend. And safe journeys, and I will see you on the other side.